You can watch it for us. Well, we are going to try to get through the last three chapters of 2 Samuel this evening. It's chapter 22 is kind of a mulligan. Then we go to 23 and 24 here. But before we do all that, y'all bow your heads with me. Let's start this evening in a word of prayer. Father God, thank you for the blessings and the grace you've shown us today. Thank you for bringing us here together one more time to open up your holy word, to praise your name through studying you. We ask, Lord, that you would be with us this evening, that you would open our hearts and minds to whatever lessons you would have us to receive, that in looking at the Old Testament we would see your eternal truths. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So a guy went to confessional one evening. He goes in next to the priest, and he says, "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned." He said, "That's fine. What is your sin, my son?" He said, "Well, I stole a car." He said, "Oh, you stole a car? That's horrible. Go on." He goes, "Oh, that's it. I just stole a car. What should I do?" He said, "Well, what you should do is, already messing it. See, this is why I need my phone. Oh, and my thing's breaking." He said, "I stole a car." He said, you stole a car?" And he goes, "Yes, I stole a car. But, Father, I'm willing to just hand it over to you and to the church as penance for my sin." And he says, "Well, I wouldn't feel right accepting a stolen car. What you should do is return it back to its rightful owner." And he says, "Well, I've tried, and he doesn't want it." And he says, "Well, okay, fine. If it's really down to it, if you've stolen the car and the owner doesn't want it back, then 10 Hail Marys, I guess you can keep the car. We don't want to just abandon it on the side of the road. You can go about your business." So the young man leaves the confessional, goes about his business. That night when the father was closing up the shop, the young man gets a call on the phone. The father goes, "You jerk, did you steal my car?" Because he tried to give it back to him. The father said, "No, that's Yep. It goes smoother with the phone. So, we're only how many into this? It's not a hard time finding jokes. It's a hard time finding any joke that is specifically church or Christian related and clean. Because you can type in church jokes, and boy, will they give you some. And by the time I edit them down, guess what? Yeah, well. Regardless. Chapter 22. We're looking at 2 Samuel 22. And as we saw in the last chapter here, these are kind of roundup chapters. The author of 2 Samuel is throwing in things not necessarily in chronological order, but he doesn't want them left out. So they're being added. They didn't quite fit in with a lot of the main narrative of King David, but we don't want to leave them, so they're added in here kind of off the cuff almost, but we don't draw a straight line through the timeline that we have here. And we saw that in the last one when they were fighting the Philistines and the sons of the giant Goliath's brothers here. And we see that here in 2 Samuel 22. It's a song, it's a poem written by King David in the early part of his reign after he had been installed as king over Israel, and he began to solidify his borders by beating back some of the neighboring pagan nations, the Philistines, the Moabites, the Ammonites, the Edomites, Syrians, all them. When we read this, you will find 2 Samuel chapter 22 is just about exactly the same as Psalm 18, which, of course, King David wrote as well. There are a few variations in some of the words used, most likely because this recording in 2 Samuel was an early draft of the song, and by the time its contents were formally added to the psaltery, to the body of the Psalms by King David, and then set to music, there were some stylistic changes that he made to the lyrics at that point to flow better with the music. So 2 Samuel 22, we're going to read through it. It is long, but it's worth reading, and you'll recognize some of the lines in here too. But you'll recognize it from the Psalm 18 that you've seen here. So 2 Samuel 22, and again, just reading straight through the thing, so go along with me. And David spake unto the Lord the words of this song in the day that the Lord had delivered him out of the hand of all his enemies and out of the hand of Saul. And he said, The Lord is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer. The God of my rock, in him will I trust. He is my shield and the horn of my salvation, my high tower and my refuge, my Savior. Thou savest me from violence. I will call on the Lord, who is worthy to be praised. So shall I be saved from my enemies. Y'all recognize that? That's song lyrics right there. When the waves of death compassed me, the floods of ungodly men made me afraid. The sorrows of hell compassed me about. The snares of death prevented me. In my distress I called upon the Lord and cried to my God, and he did hear my voice out of his temple, and my cry did enter into his ears. Then the earth shook and trembled. The foundations of heaven moved and shook because he was wroth. There went up a smoke out of his nostrils, and fire out of his mouth devoured. Coals were kindled by it. He bowed the heavens also and came down, and darkness was under his feet. And he rode upon a cherub and did fly, and he was seen upon the wings of the wind. And he made darkness pavilions round about him, dark waters and thick clouds of the skies. Through the brightness before him were coals of fire kindled. The Lord thundered from heaven, and the Most High uttered his voice, and he sent out arrows and scattered them, lightning and discomfited them. And the channels of the sea appeared. The foundations of the world were discovered at the rebuking of the Lord, at the blast of the breath of his nostrils. He sent from above. He took me. He drew me out of many waters. He delivered me from my strong enemy and from them that hated me, for they were too strong for me. They prevented me in the day of my calamity, but the Lord was my stay. He brought me forth also in a large place. He delivered me because he delighted in me. The Lord rewarded me according to my righteousness, according to the cleanness of hands hath he recompensed me. For I have kept the ways of the Lord, and have not wickedly departed from my God. For all his judgments were before me, and as for his statutes I did not depart from them. I was also upright before him, and have kept myself from mine iniquity. Therefore the Lord hath recompensed me according to my righteousness, according to my cleanness in his eyesight. With the merciful thou wilt show thyself merciful, and with the upright man thou wilt show thyself upright. With the pure thou wilt show thyself pure, and with the froward thou wilt show thyself unsavory. And the afflicted people thou wilt save, but thine eyes are upon the haughty, that thou mayest bring them down. For thou art my lamp, O Lord, and the Lord will lighten my darkness. For by thee I have run through a troop. By my God have I leaped over a wall. As for God, his way is perfect. The word of the Lord is tried. He is a buckler to all them that trust in him. For who is God save the Lord? And who is a rock save our God? God is my strength and power, and he maketh my way perfect. He maketh my feet like hinds' feet, and setteth me upon my high places. He teacheth my hands to war, so that a bow of steel is broken by mine arms. Thou hast also given me the shield of thy salvation, and thy gentleness hath made me great. Thou hast enlarged my steps under me, so that my feet did not slip. I have pursued mine enemies and destroyed them, and turned not again until I had consumed them. And I have consumed them and wounded them, that they could not arise. Yea, they are fallen under my feet. For thou hast girded me with strength to battle. Them that rose up against me hast thou subdued under me. Thou hast also given me the necks of mine enemies, that I might destroy them that hate me. They looked, but there was none to save, even unto the Lord, but he answered them not. Then did I beat them as small as the dust of the earth. I did stamp them as the mire of the street, and did spread them abroad. Thou also hast delivered me from the strivings of my people. Thou hast kept me to head of the heathen. A people which I knew not shall serve me. Strangers shall submit themselves unto me. As soon as they hear, they shall be obedient unto me. Strangers shall fade away, and they shall be afraid out of their close places. The Lord liveth, and blessed be my rock, and exalted be the God of the rock of my salvation. It is God that avengeth me, and that bringeth me down the people under me, and that bringeth me forth from mine enemies. Thou also hast lifted me up on high above them that rose up against me. Thou hast delivered me from the violent man. Therefore I will give thanks unto thee, O Lord, among the heathen, and I will sing praises unto thy name. He is the tower of salvation for his king, and showeth mercy to his anointed, unto David, and to his seed forevermore. So again, some very beautiful language in there. It is of praise. It talks about the history of what God has done for him. You see in verses 4 and 47, relatively modern song lyrics for the song, I will magnify the Lord. That's exactly where they get it from right there. Psalm 18 and 2 Samuel 22. Now, 2 Samuel 23. Now these be the last words of David. David the son of Jesse said, and the man who was raised up on high, the anointed of the God of Jacob, and the sweet psalmist of Israel said, the Spirit of the Lord spake by me, and his word was in my tongue. The God of Israel said, the rock of Israel spake to me. He that ruleth over men must be just, ruling in the fear of God. And he shall be as the light of the morning, when the sun riseth, even a morning without clouds, as the tender grass springing out of the earth by clear shining after rain. Although my house be not so with God, yet he hath made with me an everlasting covenant, ordered in all things, and sure. For this is all my salvation and all my desire, although he make it not to grow. But the sons of Belial shall be all of them as thorns thrust away, because they cannot be taken with hands. But the man that shall touch them must be fenced with iron and the staff of a spear, and they shall be utterly burned with fire in the same place. So this is a recording of some of the last words of King David. And bear in mind, David said these things, but he didn't compose it in this way. He didn't put it all together like this. The opening there reads almost like a eulogy. That's somebody praising David for what he gives a few titles and some affirmations that David most likely would not have said of himself in verse 1 there. It says, these are the words, the last words of David, the son of Jesse, the man who was raised up on high, the anointed of the God of Jacob, and the sweet psalmist of Israel. That's some flowery language to throw down about yourself. But the author is saying that of King David, who was the son of Jesse, who was raised up on high from being a shepherd up to the king of all Israel, and was the sweet psalmist of Israel. But again, not quite a title that somebody like David would feel comfortable throwing around about himself. And then verse 2 starts David's actual words, where he says, the Spirit of the Lord spake by me, and his word was in my tongue. This is an affirmation from David himself that the words he speaks have been given to him by God. God is in his tongue. And he specially mentions that anointing because of what he is about to say, because he sees that the end is near, and he is about to give a prescription for Israel and for Israel's new king, whoever might be coming after him. Verse 3, the God of Israel, the rock of Israel, told me, King David, he that ruleth over men must be just, ruling in the fear of God. So nothing completely groundbreaking, but he's saying this is the priority. It's not any big surprise or breaking news, but David says the king should be fair and should be pious and should be godly. And then David goes into this beautiful artistic bit of divinely inspired simile where he says that the king shall be as gentle as the sunlight of a cloudless morning shining on the tender grass after a spring rain, meaning that the king that they have, whoever king you are coming up, should be pious and good and fair. Yes, he should also illuminate his people. He should help them to grow, nurture them, light their way for them, even after the rains of life come. He should be breaking through the clouds as a source of light for his people here. It's a very artistic way to say all that.
A part of, I think, what's going on here, this is David to some extent reminiscing about his life. He is, we go to funerals and somebody gets up there and talks about the deceased person and tries to kind of summarize or put some closure to their life. But here is David saying about himself, how does he say it in verse 2? The Spirit of the Lord spake by me, and his word was in my tongue. That, can you imagine, just being able to say, I've lived a Christian life, or I've lived a holy life, I've been a servant of God, and he has spoken through me. That's a statement that none of the other kings could make. None of the rest of the world could say, God has spoken through me. The kings of wherever, of Egypt and all of them could not say God has spoken to me, and David could, and that's a reminiscence. That's an amazing thing.
Yeah, I know he had some ups, he had some definite downs, but no one can take away from him at the end of it all that he was used of God. That there were definite points in there where God spoke through King David to bring out the Psalms, to bring out so much wisdom and to do some legitimate things for Israel, which you see presidents get to the end of their term and start thinking about their legacy and start doing, trying to pass their big bills or start doing the international tours when they're, really lame duck and they start going off all over the world and doing the international thing so they get out there in the press so that people remember them after they're gone. And through their terms, they have some ups, they have some downs, but when they get to it, they can say, but I did this. Maybe it wasn't all perfect, maybe it wasn't all great, but what I remember the good stuff. I remember I got through the bad stuff, and I remember I have this. And for David, that true substance was that God had used him, that God had genuinely put words in his mouth to speak to his people and to lead them. And all of this, the first 4 verses there, artistic, clear-spoken until we get to verse 5, where he says, although my house be not so with God, yet he hath made with me an everlasting covenant, ordered in all things, and sure, for this is all my salvation and all my desire, although he make it not to grow. The original Hebrew in that is contested. It does not say enough for us to completely 100% come down and say what the translation on that part of it should say. A lot of scholars feel this is David's recognition that God has made a covenant with him and has been gracious to him, even though his house is not the finest example of how a king of Israel should be. So that's when he says, although my house be not so with God. A king should be that gentle stream of sunlight coming down after the rain on it, and although my house be not so. That's David saying, and maybe I wasn't that, but God has still been gracious to me. The other translation of the phrase is, in the Hebrew to English, saying, for is not my house thus with God, which means exactly the opposite. So we don't know which one to go with on here because of how the Hebrew is kind of, to us, clumsily worded. If it is, for is not my house thus with God, then David in that case is saying a king should be a gentle sunbeam bathing the grass of his kingdom in light, and wasn't my house just like that? So that would be David saying the exact opposite. Now, he is enjoying now an everlasting covenant with God and is secure in all things, and it's all that he desires, and he doesn't desire to grow the relationship beyond that. He has his relationship with God. He doesn't care to have anything more, and that explains the second part of that, but we don't know which way to take the first part. But either way, he's doing well now, looking back at things. Maybe he has a good opinion of his reign, maybe he doesn't, but he has a good opinion of his relationship with God. David goes on to say, the sons of worthlessness, the sons of Belial, because we've seen that phrase before, it means people that are just worth nothing, are like thorns, and God will deal with them, and God must deal with them, because being like thorns, they can't properly be handled by the hands of men. And when he goes on there talking about steel cages and using implements, it's men have to get spears and staves and protective clothing to handle the worst bunches of thorns. God can thrust them away by his will and divine power, where they will be utterly burned with fire, but that is not up to men. So that's what he's saying is, I've got a great relationship with God. I've handled the kingdom as best I could. There are thorns out there, and God's just going to have to deal with them, because it's of a scale that man just can't do it by himself. Verses 8 through 12. I love this part. These be the names of the mighty men whom David had. The Tachmonite that sat in the seat, chief among the captains, the same was Adino the Eznite. He lift up his spear against 800, whom he slew at one time. And after him was Eleazar the son of Doda the Ahohite, one of the 3 mighty men with David when they defied the Philistines that were there gathered together at battle, and the men of Israel were gone away. he arose and smote the Philistines until his hand was weary, and his hand clave unto the sword. And the Lord wrought a great victory that day, and the people returned after him only to spoil. And after him was Shammah the son of Agi, the Hararite, and the Philistines were gathered together into a troop, where was a piece of ground full of lentils, and the people fled from the Philistines. But he stood in the midst of the ground and defended it, and slew the Philistines, and the Lord wrought a great victory. So now we get into something that at least to me is, I don't know, it's really cool to read the visuals that come with something like this. These are the mighty men of David and their feats of strength. And I know I've made the comparison before, but to me it's like the Expendables movie, or actually Expendables Part 2, when the first one did well and they came back with a bigger budget and they started signing on more of the 80s and 90s action stars. So you've got Stallone and you've got Dolph Lundgren, you've got Arnold Schwarzenegger, but they also throw in Chuck Norris and Bruce Willis and Jean-Claude Van Damme and Mickey Rourke and all these, and then Mel Gibson and Harrison Ford by the third one. They take every action star they possibly can and jam them all into one movie and give them a gun. I love that kind of mindless entertainment. And just like the men mentioned here, anytime you drop one of the names of the Tachmanite, Adino the Eznite, anytime you drop one of those names, just like dropping Chuck Norris, all of a sudden half a dozen movies come to your mind of what Chuck Norris has done. His big air quotes here, his feats of strength, right? You have a history associated with dropping that name in there. I say Arnold Schwarzenegger, and a whole bunch of movies start coming to my mind. Well, for these people, you say Eleazar, the son of Dodo the Ahohite, and people will be like, oh yeah, that's that guy. Oh man, he killed a whole bunch of Philistines. And these are real men of action. They didn't just pretend and get a script and a bunch of pyrotechnics and then call in a stunt double at the last second. Here, cut. All right, bring in the stunt double, and then actually do it. Some of those actors do their own stunts. Adino killed 800 men with his spear. Eleazar killed so many Philistines one day that his hand, and this is known to happen apparently, I looked it up, his hand cramped up and was bound to his sword to the point that they had to pry his hand off of his sword after everything. Killed so many Philistines that day that his sword wouldn't leave his hand. Shammah single-handedly fended off a whole troop of Philistines from taking a barley field. When everybody had left and he was surrounded, dude stuck it out on a barley field and killed a whole bunch of Philistines over a plot of Israelite land. Verses 13 through 17. And 3 of the 30 chief went down and came to David in the harvest time unto the cave of Adullam. And the troop of the Philistines pitched in the valley of Rephaim. And David was then in a hold, and the garrison of the Philistines was then in Bethlehem. And David longed and said, Oh, that one would give me drink of the water of the well of Bethlehem, which is by the gate. And the 3 mighty men brake through the host of the Philistines, and drew water out of the well of Bethlehem that was by the gate, and took it and brought it to David. Nevertheless, he would not drink thereof, but poured it out unto the Lord. And he said, Be it far from me, O Lord, that I should do this. Is not this the blood of the men that went in jeopardy of their lives? Therefore he would not drink it. These things did these 3 mighty men. So this is not the 3 just mentioned in the first 12 verses. This is Abishai, Benaiah, and a third that's not named here. And they're about to go into them here. But this great feat was at a time that David was king and was fighting with the Philistines. And while the Philistines are fortified in the city of Bethlehem, David is headquartered in his old haunt in the caves of Adullam, where he once hid from Saul's pursuit. At that time, David wasn't doing especially well in his campaign against the Philistines. And you can imagine him in the caves, where he once hid from Saul, somewhat sad, dejected at how things are going, reminiscing of his native town. Because remember, David was the son of Jesse. Jesse, the Bethlehemite, according to 1 Samuel 16, it says Jesse the Bethlehemite. David was from the town of Bethlehem. And he's sad in his cave, and he says out loud to himself something like, I remember the days of my youth when things were simple, when I tarried with God while tending to flocks over there in Bethlehem, where we're now fighting, and how wonderful and quenching the waters of the well at the gate of Bethlehem were to me in those days. Man, I would love to have another drink from the water in that well. The problem is, you can't say something like that out loud when you're surrounded by men like these. They start getting ideas, and not at David's direction, but on David's desire, his expressed desire, but he didn't tell him to do it. These three mighty men broke through the lines of the Philistines, not to take the city, not to assassinate a strategic target or, with any kind of military ideation, but just to draw water from the well at the gates of Bethlehem and take it back to their king. Just pure honor and chivalry, putting life and limb at risk for this minor task just because their king, who is an honorable king, who would never ask such a thing from them directly, has a whim to drink from the well of his youth. And when they return to David and they tell him what they've done, he took the drink and he poured it out to the Lord. And don't miss that. It sounds like he just says, guys, I can't take this, and he poured it out. And if you read it too fast, that's exactly what it sounds like. But that's not what happened. The Hebrew word that's used there is that of a sacrificial drink offering. That is one of the kinds of offering they would take and pour it out. He viewed the water as so sacred, bought at such a price, the endangering of the very lives of the men he held dear, that he dedicated that water from that Bethlehemite well, to God. And David poured it out as a drink offering to the Lord. And David said, "Far be it from me, O Lord, that I should do this. This is the blood of the men that went in jeopardy of their lives." It had become to David more than just water. It was a cup of the blood of his men. He wasn't dare going to drink it. They put their lives on the line for this. So it had been elevated in his sight to something sacred enough that he could offer it to God. Not just tap water, but something bought at great price. They had risked their lives on this whim to carry out this act of honor, and it elevated that water in his sight. So he wouldn't dare drink it, but it was worthy enough at that point for him to pour it out in a drink offering to the Lord. Just like you wouldn't offer a goat, you wouldn't offer a lamb, you wouldn't offer an ox that had spot or blemish. At this point, this was no longer just tap water, no longer just well water. This had become a much more sacred offering to him that it would be worthy to be able to offer to God. Verses 18 through 23. And Abishai, the brother of Joab, the son of Zeruiah, was chief among three. And he lifted up his spear against 300 and slew them, and had the name among three. Was he not most honorable of three? Therefore he was their captain. Howbeit he attained not unto the first three. And Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, the son of a valiant man of Kabzeel, who had done many acts, he slew 2 lion-like men of Moab. He went down also and slew a lion in the midst of a pit in time of snow. And he slew an Egyptian, a goodly man. And the Egyptian had a spear in his hand, but he went down to him with a staff and plucked the spear out of the Egyptian's hand and slew him with his own spear. These things did Benaiah the son of Jehoiada, and had the name among 3 mighty men. He was more honorable than the 30, but he attained not to the first 3, and David set him over his guard. So these are the 3 that he was talking about would break through the Philistine lines and get him the water. One was Abishai, the nephew of David, who, if you remember, wanted to kill a guy just for mocking King David, who, in the most recent chapter we talked about, they were fighting with the giants of the Philistines, and one of them set his sights on David. Abishai is the one who came out of nowhere and slew that giant, and then looked at David and said, "You can't be fighting in these battles anymore. You're too old." He didn't say it like that. He said it a little softer, but David was feeling it. Wasn't as fast as he used to be, and he needed somebody to go in there and save him from a giant. Abishai was chief among the 3 in that he had the most fame, he had the most popularity and renown. He killed 300 men with his spear, but even still, despite having the honor and prominence among the 3, he couldn't match them for strength. The second of the 3 was Benaiah, who slew the 2 great warriors of Moab, killed a fierce starving lion in the snow when it would be tired and cold and hungry and a bit more fierce than normal. And he slew an Egyptian by beating him with a staff and eventually wrestling the spear from the giant's hands and killing him with his own spear, and he was a giant Egyptian. He was more honorable than the generic 30 of David's guards, but not quite so elevated as the first trio that was mentioned of Eleazar and Shammah and those three that were mentioned in the first verses there. Now buckle up, verses 24 through 39. Asahel, the brother of Joab, was one of the 30. Elhanan, the son of Dodo of Bethlehem. Shammah the Harodite. Elika the Harodite. Helez the Paltite. Ira the son of Ikish the Tekoite. Abiezer the Anathothite. Mebunai the Hushathite. Zalman the Ahohite. Maharai the Netophathite. Heleb, son of Bana, a Netophathite. Ittai, the son of Ribai, out of Gibeah of the children of Benjamin. Benaiah the Parathonite. Hidai of the brooks of Gash. Abialbon the Arbathite, Asmaveth the Barhumite, Eliab the Shalbanite of the sons of Jashin, Jonathan, Shammah the Hararite, Ahim the son of Shara the Hararite, Eliphalet the son of Ahazbai, the son of Makathite, Eliam the son of Ahithophel the Gilonite, Hezrai the Carmelite, Perai the Arbite, Igal the son of Nathan of Zobah, Benai the Gadite, Zelek the Ammonite, Naharai the Beerothite, armor-bearer Joab the son of Zariah, Ira an Ithrite, Gareb an Ithrite, Uriah the Hittite, 30 in all. So, I know. All of those pronounced impeccably, and just take my word for it. First, David lists Asahel as one of the 30. And if you remember that name, it's because Asahel was the brother of Joab that was killed by Abner in the skirmish where Abner was running away, and he kept saying, turn to the right, turn to the left, and the guy who was known for running kept coming up, and so he just jabbed his spear backwards and killed him. Eventually, Abner killed him with a spear. That's the one that Joab got vengeance for later. So by that name being there first, we see that this is not a present list of David's great warriors, because that one's dead. Who else is dead on here? At the very end there, Uriah the Hittite. So again, he's listed among these people, but it may not be, it might be more in memoriam for some of them. What follows after that is a whole bunch of names for which we have no context whatsoever. A lot of them are not mentioned outside of this one passage. It's a whole bunch of names and places even. When they say of here, the Hamathite of wherever, we can't tell where a lot of those places even are. Some of them are so small and have been lost to time. Transliteration aside, the slight changes in their names and the spelling of their names, we can trace some things like that, but a lot of these were just too small. It'd be like trying to describe Sadler, Texas to somebody 2,000 years from now. 100 years from now, it might not be called Sadler. We might have such a Muslim invasion that's Al-Sadlar or something like that before. In 100 years from now, and then 1,000 years from now, well, it's just disappeared from all the maps. And if somebody says, hey, Sadler, Texas, well, you'd have to go back over 1,000 years to see where it was even mentioned and try and find a map for it. You know what I mean? That is 2 Samuel 23. And oh, good, we've got time. Good, I thought.
Text. Coat looks so tiny.
Look, I do. I told y'all this is over as soon as I came up here.
Did coat shrink? Did pasture shrink?
Y'all gonna give me a complex.
I'm getting pictures of their screen where it's too big.
No, I believe it.
Little bitty coat.
What you're going to do, you're giving your pastor an inferiority complex and leaving here and going to the gym.
That won't make it taller.
Huh?
That won't make it taller.
No, I'm just going to have to get bigger.
When you get some new person that's like, oh, he's fun size.
Yeah.
I texted back and said, honey, I shrunk the pasture.
There are smaller pastors out there. I've seen them. Y'all have a decent size one.
Reminds me of Robert Reich. You remember him?
Robert who?
Robert Reich. He was the Secretary of State, wasn't it? Under who? Clinton? That little bitty guy, about 4 feet tall.
These were not my design. 2 Samuel 24, verses 1 through 4. And again the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he moved David against them to say, Go, number Israel and Judah. For the king said to Joab, the captain of the host which was with him, Go now through all the tribes of Israel, from Dan even to Beersheba, and number ye the people, that I may know the number of the people. And Joab said unto the king, Now the Lord thy God add unto the people, how many soever they be, 100-fold, and that the eyes of my lord the king may see it. But why doth my lord the king delight in this thing? Notwithstanding, the king's word prevailed against Joab and against the captains of the host, and Joab and the captains of the host went out from the presence of the king to number the people of Israel. This is an interesting episode to close out the book of 2 Samuel here. David did something here that kindled the anger of the Lord against Israel at great cost. And the first thing that's interesting about it is verse 1. It says, And again the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he moved David against them to say, Go number Israel and Judah. The way it's phrased right there, here in 2 Samuel, it says that this temptation assaulted David. He was tempted to quantify his earthly strength, to put a number to it, to count his people, see how large his kingdom was, how many men he had under him, and he was tempted by that, and he gave into it. And it says there, he moved David against them to say. He moved David against his own people in this. God was angry for what David had did, and God was the cause of David having done it. But when we read in 1 Chronicles 21, which is an account of this exact same thing, 1 Chronicles 21:1 says, Then Satan rose up against Israel and incited David to take a census of Israel. So David said to Joab and the commanders of the troops, Go and count the Israelites from Beersheba to Dan and bring me a report. So in 1 Chronicles, the author attributes the temptation to count the people to Satan. In 2 Samuel 24, it says it is more of God. So how do we understand this? The prophet who wrote 2 Samuel is taking a somewhat higher theological view of God in his writing, to put it plainly. Not that God is the author of evil or that he leads men into temptation, but it's a recognition that what is happening here, what David does, is ultimately, in God's grand scheme, permitted by God to happen. The devil is tempting David. He gives into it, as it says in 1 Chronicles 21, and God allowed it to happen. He saw fit that David should be tested by this, but then David fell prey to it. So when it says God moved against them to say, Go number Israel and Judah, yes, he did in the way that he allowed it and could have stopped it, but God doesn't stop all evil in the world, because then freedom of choice would be completely gone from his creation. What we see in 1 Chronicles is a clear picture that Satan moved and enticed David towards quantifying his strength, actually trying to put a number to how strong he was, a very earthly measurement of his own power. The translation it's definitely a little confusing, but it boils down to David wanted to count his people. And bear in mind, knowing how many people were in the nation of Israel, that's not sinful in and of itself, because in the first chapter of Numbers, God ordered the people to be counted. In the 26th chapter of Numbers, God said, do it again. But that was by the order of God. It was to show the people that God, even though the numbers had changed from one tribe to another because one kind of committed a bit of blasphemy and got wiped out by a few thousand, another one gained in there, it was God showing them that he had kept their numbers just about the same. He had maintained their strength in the wilderness, so it was to show them that, but it was also practically to give them account of people, because at the end of Numbers, they were about to start casting lots as they crossed over the Jordan. Whenever they conquered everybody, they were going to be assigning lots to the tribes of land, with the largest going to the larger tribes. The problem here is David has a selfish reason for wanting the people counted, and God has not told him to do it. And when David gives the order, Joab, of all people, Joab, who just a couple chapters ago grabbed a guy by the beard and stabbed him and then left him bleeding in the middle of the road, Joab can tell this is a bad idea. This is in some sense, common sense to them, some kind of there was some cultural norm at the time that David was egregiously going against. Joab could sense that this was wrong and that he shouldn't do this, and it probably escapes our modern mindset why, and I don't know that there is any real cultural translation to be able to say why, but you know it's bad when Joab is the guy looking at the king and saying, I don't think we should do this. He looks at David and he says, God's added a lot of people to all of the Israelites, no doubt. But even, how does he say it? Even if it were... And Joab said unto the king, Now the Lord thy God add unto the people how many soever they be, 100-fold, and that the eyes of my lord the king may see it. But why doth my lord king delight in this thing? What he's saying there is, hey, God's added a bunch of people to us. But even if we're 100 times more than what we started out with, why would the king delight in knowing that? So Joab is pushing back against this. It doesn't matter, though. David's command ultimately prevails over Joab, and he sends Joab out to number all the people of the kingdom. It says from Dan to Beersheba. That's saying from the top point to the lowest point of it, the whole kingdom, one end to the other. Verses 5 through 9. And they passed over Jordan and pitched in Aroer. I can't say that. Anybody want to volunteer? Aroer. I can barely say the spelling of it. Aroer, on the right side of the city that lieth in the midst of the river of Gad and toward Jazer. Then they came to Gilead and to the land of Tatim-Hodshi, and they came to Danjan and about to Zidon, and came to the stronghold of Tyre and to all the cities of the Hivites and of the Canaanites, and they went out to the south of Judah, even to Beersheba. So when they had gone through all the land, they came to Jerusalem at the end of 9 months and 20 days. And Joab gave up the sum of the number of the people unto the king, and there were in Israel 800,000 valiant men that drew the sword, and the men of Judah were 500,000 men. So Joab and the men went out, counted, crossed over the rivers, through the woods, over the mountains, went everywhere they could, counting Israelites. They counted the men of Judah, and it's interesting, too, to see. Just a couple chapters ago, they were talking about how the men of Judah were the last ones to come in and say, yeah, we should reinstate the king. Then the men of Judah sent word and got David, and the men of Judah were the ones that took him back into Israel to reinstate him, and the men of Israel were at odds with them. And it set those two forces against each other even before, because you see later in the Old Testament when civil war actually breaks out and the two kingdoms are divided, it's between Israel and Judah. Here you're seeing the distinction between Israel and Judah long before a civil war ever breaks out over anything. But you're already seeing the animosity between these two peoples begin to form. So when you see, just keep in mind, these are the preliminary emotions that go into what eventually led to the Civil War whenever we talk about the splitting of the kingdom here. But it says even now, he went through, they numbered all the people of Jerusalem, they numbered all of Israel and all the people of Judah. And then they go through even to the cities of the Hivites and of the Canaanites. They go out to count the remnants of the pagan people who are still living in the land. And after 9 months and 20 days, they returned to Jerusalem with a count of 1.3 million. And that's the two of them added together. And that's just men, too, mind you. That's just men. And then it tells us in First Chronicles, I believe, I didn't write it down, they didn't even count the tribes of Levi and Dan, if I remember correctly. They didn't count the Levites on there because they're not fighting men, and then they left one other tribe out. But all of that's to say 1.3 million is on the conservative side of the number of people that are actually in the nation of Israel, and they're only listing the men right there. Verses 10 through 17. And David's heart smote him after that he had numbered the people. And David said unto the Lord, I have sinned greatly in that I have done, and now I beseech thee, O Lord, take away the iniquity of thy servant, for I have done very foolishly. For when David was up in the morning, the word of the Lord came unto the prophet Gad, David's seer, saying, Go and say unto David, Thus saith the Lord, I offer thee 3 things. Choose thee one of them, that I may do it unto thee. So Gad came to David and told him and said unto him, Shall 7 years of famine come unto thee in thy land? Or wilt thou flee 3 months before thine enemies while they pursue thee? Or that there be 3 days pestilence in thy land? Now advise and see what answer I shall return to him that sent me. And David said unto Gad, I am in a great strait. Let us fall now into the hand of the Lord, for his mercies are great, and let me not fall into the hand of man. So the Lord sent a pestilence upon Israel from the morning even to the time appointed, and there died of the people from Dan even to Beersheba 70,000 men. And when the angel stretched out his hand upon Jerusalem to destroy it, the Lord repented him of the evil and said to the angel that destroyed the people, It is enough. Stay now thine hand. And the angel of the Lord was by the threshing place of Araunah the Jebusite. And David spake unto the Lord when he saw the angel that smote the people, and said, Lo, I have sinned, and I have done wickedly. But these sheep, what have they done? Let thine hand, I pray thee, be against me and against my father's house. So the count was in. The deed was done, no taking it back. And when that's all said and done, David finally comes to his senses. His conscience is awakened, and he was smitten by his own heart. And he starts looking around saying, What have I done? And recognizing his guilt in having committed such a selfish act of faithlessness is what it really is, David went to God and he asked for forgiveness. And he got up that morning to pray and to repent. And at that time, God sent Gad the prophet to David to tell what God would have of him, what the punishment is. And we haven't seen Gad since way back in 1 Samuel 22 when David was on the run from King Saul. He ended up taking his parents, who had left Jerusalem, to go with him on the run. And he said, no, y'all can't handle life on the road like this. And he took them to the king of the Moabites, the king of Moab there. And that's when Gad came in the last time and said, you shouldn't stick around here. You should go back out. So it's been quite a while here, but we haven't seen Gad since then. But he's still called David's seer right there in verse 11. So he has been working for David, acting as a prophet, advising David this whole time, but he's been doing it quietly. He's been doing it from the shadows. You don't get him within a whole lot of the narration. Gad goes to David, and he says, pick your punishment. Something any good parent has done at one point or another, right? Is it the belt? Is it this? Is that? You pick it. Is it belt? Is it switch? Well, not pestilence, I know. But he says, hey, 7 years of famine, which would take a whole long time, and a lot of people would die. 3 months of running from your enemies, which would take a shorter time, but a whole bunch of people are going to die. It's going to be real stressful. Or 3 days of pestilence, which you have to know, if it's just 3 days, then a lot of people are going to die in a really short time, if the other two are so long and that one's so short. And David thought it over for a bit, and he said, I can't pick out of those. In all of his wisdom, one did not say it, which, I mean, how do you say, is it better to get it all over with inside of 3 days, or is it better to drag it out over years of your people suffering day by day and maybe losing as many to pestilence as you would to starvation, though they would live longer, but at the same time it's the quality. I don't understand at all how anybody could pick between those. So he tells Gad, God is just and gracious. Let God decide. He'll do it better than I can. So God brought 3 days of severe disease, of pestilence on the whole of Israel. 3 days that killed 70,000 men. And again, that's just men. You have to think that women and children would at least made up another 70,000 on there as well. This is the, to date, greatest pestilence that has been sent. And they've had a few sent out on the children of Israel while they were murmuring in the wilderness. But this is the greatest by far as the numbers. And the angel was approaching Jerusalem. The angel that God used to carry out this judgment is approaching Jerusalem to really lay it low, to really pour out wrath on the city. And God stopped the angel before it reached the city at the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite. And take note as well, verse 17. David spoke unto the Lord when he saw the angel that smote the people. This is not poetic language. 1 Chronicles 21:16. When David lifted up his eyes and saw the angel of the Lord standing between heaven and earth with a drawn sword in his hand stretched out over Jerusalem, David and the elders clothed in sackcloth fell face down. David saw the angel. It's almost it's a detail you could pass over reading 2 Samuel, but when you go to 1 Chronicles 21, it points it out very specifically. He saw it suspended above the earth with its sword drawn, ready to go strike down the whole of Jerusalem. David saw the angel. The elders saw the angel. And most of the time when an angel is just coming with good tidings, when it's coming to say something about, Christmas to Mary, or when it's coming in and saying, hey, the Savior's about to be born, even when they have good tidings, they have to start off with, fear not, I'm an angel. When they're handing out pestilence with their sword drawn, I can't imagine how terrifying the image of an angel is. And all these guys hit the floor. And the sight was so terrible, David implored the Lord to spare his people. Take out your righteous vengeance on me. I understand you are righteous and you are God, and it's right that we see this for the sin that I have committed. But what have they done? They are the flock in my care, the flock over which I rule. You take all this out on me. Verses 18 through 25. And Gad came that day to David and said unto him, Go up, rear an altar unto the Lord in the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite. And David, according to the saying of Gad, went up as the Lord commanded. And Araunah looked and saw the king and his servants coming on toward him, and Araunah went out and bowed himself before the king on his face upon the ground. And Araunah said, Wherefore is my lord the king come to his servant? And David said, To buy the threshing floor of thee, to build an altar unto the Lord, that the plague may be stayed from the people. And Araunah said unto David, Let my lord the king take and offer up what seemeth good unto him. Behold, here be oxen for burnt sacrifice, and threshing instruments and other instruments of the oxen for wood. All these things did Araunah as king give unto the king. And Araunah said unto the king, The Lord thy God accept thee. And the king said unto Araunah, Nay, but I will surely buy it of thee at a price, neither will I offer burnt offerings unto the Lord my God, that of which doth cost me nothing. So David bought the threshing floor and the oxen for 50 shekels of silver. And David built there an altar unto the Lord, and offered burnt offerings and peace offerings. So the Lord was entreated for the land, and the plague was stayed from Israel. So in response to his humility and his repentance, God sent Gad the prophet to David and told him, Go to where the angel stopped, go to the threshing floor of Araunah, go there and build an altar to God. When David approached the place, the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite, David is greeted by none other than Araunah the Jebusite. And the man greets David and says, What can your loyal servant do for you, O king? And David tells him, he said, I've come here to buy your threshing floor, to build an altar, and to make a sacrifice so that this pestilence that's killing thousands of people can finally stop. And Araunah hears that and he says, Take it. Just take it. You don't need to buy it. I'm happy to give it to you. I'm a loyal servant. Take it. Take some oxen for the sacrifice. Take the tools of the threshing floor. Take the wooden things that I use to handle the oxen and handle the threshing. You go use them for firewood on your burnt offering. And verse 23 says, All these things did Araunah as a king give unto the king. And here's another translation in here where scholars are a little bit torn. It is very possible that Araunah was the king of the Jebusites. Because remember, Jebusites, Jebus, that is Jerusalem. That's the same city. There was a Canaanite population there, pagan people that they had to drive out. And it took them a while to drive them out even because of where they were situated. But they had inhabited Jerusalem before they were displaced and conquered. If he was the king of that people, it would certainly make sense why he's got lands, he's got oxen, he's got his own threshing floor, and he's generous enough to give these kind of things away without anybody offering to pay for anything. And he's saying, as a king, I'm giving to you a king, and it would be a recognition of an almost equal footing between the two of them as kings. I'm giving this to you as a king. The other way to look at it is as though the author is praising his generosity as being so great it was kingly. that he was a normal man who, in service to David, loyal service to David, was willing to give away and burn down his whole livelihood to stop the plague for King David. Now, we can't say for sure which. That's not really the best lesson of the passage, honestly. The best lesson is David's response. He says, no, I will pay for this because I will not offer to my God a sacrificial offering that cost me nothing, because that's not sacrificial. That's regifting is what that is. That's when you get something for Christmas, you got a nice candle, and you don't light it all year long, and you end up putting it in a gift basket with some tissue paper and giving it to somebody else the following Christmas. Didn't cost you a thing. Don't act like you really got put out. And somebody might say, oh, this is my favorite. You can't find these anywhere. Where did you go? And you know, oh, I went all over, but I finally found the thing. No, you didn't. It's not sacrificial. You're regifting. It's an insult to God, and David's not going to do it. So he insists on paying the man. And it says here in 2 Samuel, it's 50 shekels for the threshing floor and the oxen. But again, we have wonderful parallel passages here and in 1 Chronicles. And in 1 Chronicles, it tells us that altogether, David gave him 600 shekels. So not just for the threshing floor and the oxen, he paid for the man's whole plot of land and everything on it. So David, in recognition of this loyalty, was generous in return. And then once he took all those things, once he chopped up the implements and killed the ox and did the sacrifice and burnt everything and did it as you normally would, a sacrificial offering, at that point the plague was stayed from Israel. And that's how they wrap up the book of 2 Samuel. Oh, and we're just on time, ain't we? So, 2 Samuel. We will go through 1st and 2nd Kings. Now, some of this will be repetitive as we go through Kings and Chronicles. So a lot of the coming weeks are going to be like, hey, this is different. Hey, this is a parallel passage to what we read here, and a lot of summarization, and it may not be me reading absolutely everything to you, because just like in the first chapter, it's Bathsheba in the book of 1 Kings there. So if there's anything different, just like we've been seeing back and forth in the parallel passages that's really edifying to point out, I will strive to do that. But we may not be going one verse at a time with everything that we do. Did you raise a hand? I'm through talking.